Welcome back to Better Life, Better Business with local business coach and time management expert Christoph Nauer of Balance 6. I'm your host, Rebecca Troxel, founder and CEO of Rebecca's Vault. We had a lot of fun last week getting to know the time management expert himself. So, we're going to jump right back into our series of interviewing business owners, not only about what they do to help you with time and in your business, but how they're navigating the world of being an entrepreneur.
Thank you, Rebecca, and welcome everyone. I'm Christoph Nauer of Balance 6, and today you will be listening in on a conversation I'll be having with our guest, Cynthia Greenawalt, with Sea Change Networking. And I found out talking to Cynthia that her name actually is Swiss, like mine. So hi, Cynthia. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello there. Hello. Thank you for having me, Christoph and Rebecca. It's a pleasure.
Well, great to have you, and welcome to a fellow Swiss. As you know, the purpose of my podcast is to provide excellent resources, helpful tools, and tips to business owners. And that's exactly why I wanted to have you as a guest, Cynthia. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is you do and how you bring value to business owners and entrepreneurs?
I love that question. How does one bring value to others? And I'm going to, of course, answer it as to how I do that. And I actually loved that you, when we prepped for this and you gave me some ideas of some of the things you wanted to brainstorm on, I loved that it got me to think deeply. So I appreciate the power of your question that would have me re-examine. And I think all of us should always be re-examining. And one of the things, that's what I do. I actually encourage people to re-examine, to reflect, to dig deep and see who am I in the face of things. So you could say the value that I bring to my clients and even to the people who are part of my communities and my networks is I'm here to challenge the status quo of what they think is who they are. I'm here to have people like blow the lid off the very concept of their own sense of self and their limits, because my little phrase that I love is that I want people to remember that they're bigger than they know themselves to be. Recently, I heard the phrase, you're bigger. He said, it was an interview I heard, and he said, you are greater, far greater than you've been led to believe. And I thought, oh, that's exactly what I stand for, that people have been programmed from their past, from their schooling, from their family, from their failures, to sort of settle into a particular self-image or a certain level of performance. And I look for the people who know they're bigger than they know themselves to be. They have this like hunch. And I absolutely blow the paradigm from which people stand in so that they can actually reinvent themselves to match that unlimited self. So yeah, that's the work I do. Thanks for that question too.
Well, you just got my curiosity going now. So how on earth are you doing that, Cynthia? Come on, you can't just throw this teaser out now and let us all sweat it out, okay?
Yes. So how? Okay, so how I do it is I want to find out. I mean, Simon Sinek talks about the why. It's to dig deep into if indeed time were of no, if people had unlimited time, unlimited money to catapult into the future, who would I be being? What is the work I would be doing? And one of my favorite ways to access that is something I call the Aunt Tilly question, which is, Christoph, you get home today and you open the mail and there's this unusually strange legal looking document in your pile of mail, and you open it up and it's this document telling you that your Aunt Tilly, that you didn't even know that you had, has passed away. And of all the family members that she's been watching over the years, she picked you to leave her $22 million to. And I do this exercise with people so I can catapult them into a future that's sort of unfamiliar and sort of so outrageous that I ask them, tell me, where are you sitting as you sip your favorite beverage and you close your laptop and you got this most amazing news in 3 different emails you just read, and you're living the life that became possible because you properly invested and expanded and contributed? Like, what are you doing? What's happening right now as you close that laptop in the future, sitting on that? What's your view? Is it overlooking Central Park? Is it overlooking a beach? Is it overlooking a mountain range? Where is this? And people start to bowl away at, well, okay, this is what I really want. And sometimes they're doing exactly what they want to be doing and the thing they're doing now. And sometimes it's something else. So I find strategies and ways to get people out of the familiar platform of who we know ourselves to be. And I like to mess around with temporality. In other words, I like to mess around with time and go into future time and come back from the future. So that's one of the ways I do it. I use brain science, I use behavioral models, so many fun things to bust open the frameworks from which we view life.
I love it. I love it. It's so true. It's, once we step outside our comfort zone, once we allow ourselves to dream big, that's when things can happen. And you're absolutely right. If you still do what you now do, then I think you found your passion. And as you were talking, I said, yes, I would love to be on a beach, but I would be doing the same thing I'm doing, just right there from the beach,
Absolutely.
So I love that. Let me ask you another question. What's one thing you wish you had known when you began your business?
Oh, that's a really good one. I was very fortunate in my 20s, which is when I busted out of corporate America and moved into entrepreneurship. I had amazing mentors. So that in that regard, I was super lucky. But one of the recommendations that I'm great, my network was always referring me, read this book, take this course, consider this view. I was challenged a lot in my early days as a professional, which made a big difference. But later in my professional career, I stumbled upon the work of Robert Kiyosaki. And the reason I love the second book, and I think you and I chatted about that way back when one of our first calls together, was the second book he wrote, The Cash Flow Quadrant. And it had me see that while I explore nonlinear thinking models in all areas of life, I had not examined the way I'd been programmed to think in a linear way regarding money and business. So I love that book because it just like, I did a whole like, whoa, what am I doing that's tied to me being there? So the idea that I had not examined the degree to which I was trapped in a paradigm of a bunch of entrepreneurs. I come from a legacy of entrepreneurs, but they always had to be there to drive it. In other words, they were the magic sauce to their business. And I love Einstein's quote, which is, the challenges we have cannot be solved from the level of thinking that created them. And one of the sort of conundrums, you could say, that I play with my clients is they are entrepreneurs that realize their income is maxed out because it depends on their efforting. They're doing all the magic tricks to drive the business. And I said, as long as we think from the same quadrant, that's what Kiyosaki calls them, the 4 different quadrants. So there's the S quadrant, small business owner, and then there's the B quadrant, business owner, which is a system-driven business. So I said, as long as we think from the S quadrant, we can't solve the problems of the S quadrant. And that's like saying, as long as you keep thinking from English, you're never going to get out of English. So we have to actually catapult, there's that paradigm shifting, and like catapult ourselves into the thinking of this new quadrant, whichever one. It could be the investor quadrant. Some people are reinventing themselves to be investors from that quadrant, and that's what actually pulls us into success results in that quadrant. So that's probably my favorite one, is that cash flow quadrant was one of the most powerful paradigm shifting tools ever in my career. And it's absolutely, the size of my goals are so different, even from like 2 years ago, because I dove into it again. I don't just read it once and then put it away. I continue to read and examine and dialogue about it. So that's been a huge contributor and accelerator for me and my clients. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I told Rebecca that you're probably going to talk about the 4 quadrants. I'm sure that not all listeners are familiar with those 4 quadrants. Would you just briefly summarize what those are, so that I don't want the listeners to go away and say, what the heck was she talking about? Right?
Well, okay, so I didn't know you were going to ask me to do it but you're going to laugh. Every call I'm on, I must bring, you can tell it's all curly cued and is like beat up, but this is my little notebook that I always use in every meeting, because I'm talking about it all the time. Just like if I'm going to become fluent in French, I need to keep hearing French again and again, read French, read poetry in French, examine French, speak French, hear people speaking French. So this little notebook is always by my desk. And when I can't find it, I panic. And then there it is buried under the, the tissue box or something. So this little diagram is my handwritten version of the cash flow quadrant. So it's saying how, and these are Kiyosaki's words. I credit Robert Kiyosaki, source that right there. He says all forms of cash flow can be grouped into, and anyone who creates cash flow, it's only in one of these 4 ways. And some people are multi-quadrant. So it's not that you're stuck in a quadrant. But he said, don't take my word for it. And this is a good 15 or so years ago. He said, don't take my word for it. Go look at every single way you can think of to create cash flow and see where it lands. And sure enough, I put it to the test. Everything fits into one of these 4. So the E quadrant is the first one. That's the employee quadrant. And I have friends who are 7-figure earners in the E quadrant. I have friends who are, minimum wage earners in the E quadrant. So it's a range. It doesn't matter. It's not about the amount of money. It's that they report to someone to fulfill on a specific accountability in that role. The S quadrant is often where, so that would be me when I was at Ford Motor Company. I said, I cannot find my joy here. Every idea I had, they're like, that's not how we do it here. I mean, they were great people, but they had no way to contain the creative, insane ideas of Cynthia Greenawalt. So I just felt totally suppressed and I said, I'm out of here. So in my mid-20s, I started my own coaching practice in transformational coaching, and I went right into the S quadrant. And the S quadrant is where the lone wolf, renegade, trailblazer is there, and I got independence. And that's the irony of the S quadrant. It wasn't like I worked less. It's just that I got to do my own thing, call my own shots. And then I got curious along the way. I thought, wait a minute, how do I create something that doesn't need me constantly? And I began studying, and I was very fortunate to have a number of mentors in my early 30s who were in the B quadrant and the I quadrant. So B quadrant is business owner, but it's a system-driven business that one might build diligently and work their tail off for 2, 3, 5, 6 years. But then the business is able to run and have a life of its own, and the owner can step away. And then the I quadrant would be investor. Now, one quick fun thing about the B quadrant is the litmus is 6 months. If the business can run 6 months without us. And some people can be like Ray Kroc, who started McDonald's. That's one way into the B quadrant, where you build the thing, like you get an idea, he saw it and he goes, I'm building this thing. Or a friend of mine bought 6, Burger Kings and said, I didn't have to invent it. I just liked the idea that if I bought 6, I could build my own empire and be free. So the magic number is 5 or more. So 5 or more franchises is the B quadrant. 4 franchises or less, I'm in the S quadrant. And I used to own some franchises. I only owned 2 training franchises. And no one told me that back then, that I'd need to own 5 of those to be free. So as an S quadrant franchisee, if you own 4 or less, that's called an owner operator. They're like still staying in the business to drive it. And as long as we love the work, we don't mind that we're not free, because we're free by virtue of the work we're doing makes a difference. So that's what I find. People who find joy in the work, like their work is their ministry, so to speak, they will work until the day they drop, because the work is so meaningful. And the money they make, if it funds all their dreams, I call that a happy S. So there's a lot of fun I have with this quadrant.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for shedding some light on that. That's really very helpful. And I remember, because you explained to me one of our first calls that we were on. So that's great. Now, you are a serial entrepreneur, so you obviously have lots and lots going on. So I would imagine you had to learn the whole idea of delegating. So what role does delegating play in your business?
Yeah, it's really, really good. So the way I've learned to delegate, it actually has always been looking at each business model that I've operated in. So anything that I could let go of, like, okay, the design of something, or the putting the invitations together of something. So wherever I could actually, where my genius wasn't relevant, I would bring in virtual assistant. That was one of the best things I learned, was to have a virtual assistant. So I'm a huge proponent of that resource. And then I also looked for profit sharing models, where I created teams, and the team created leverage, because I could set up a profit sharing with something, and that person could take up aspects of the project that I didn't like, but everybody was winning financially. So I'm finding that to be a really powerful form of leverage. I'm a big fan of leverage, and delegating is a big piece of that. So we could either pay the money, sometimes it's barter that I've used to create resources and people to lean in on. And then also working on teams. I've noticed some of the big projects I'm working on now, having teams, it allows us to say, okay, wait, what do we love? What are we good at? Okay, no one really loves that piece, but who can do it more naturally than the others? You know, so it takes dialogue and conversation and mapping out the game plan and the deliverables and the accountability structure. So yes, structures and delegation go hand in hand. Absolutely. Yeah. And working with a coach, I've always actually had coaching structures, whether it's an accountability partner or a mastermind group, because some people can lean in heavily with a mastermind group, or with a coach that they hire to hold themselves accountable. So that would be the ways I would recommend how we learn to take on these habits that are not new, or that are new and not already natural. Just like if I'm an athlete and I want to change up my tennis game, I'm going to bring on a coach who's going to point me in new directions, and those new directions are going to naturally be uncomfortable. And so thank goodness for the accountability structure to keep us sticking with the thing that are left to our own devices we'd rather not do, which then brings us back to same old behaviors, same old results. And the challenges we have can't be solved from the same level of thinking that created them, says Einstein. So that's why support structures are so important, if indeed what we want is to break through and produce something that is like a discontinue, like a leap beyond the predictable path. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's important to mention, that coaching and leverage, especially with teams, is important. We were just talking about this, not even earlier today, how one of my first experiences with Christoph was when he helped my team to leverage their talents and really delegating tasks amongst us. And that was how we were really successful. And
that's huge.
It ties really nicely into prioritization. And a lot of our vodcasts, if you have watched previous episodes, we talk a lot about prioritizing, and I highly recommend you check those out. But we've discussed the 80-20 rule, the ABCDE method, proactive procrastination. How do you prioritize in your business beyond just the delegation?
Well, I've had a couple different coaches in my world, and you could use that. To me, I have an ABC, and some people call it like vital, useful. There's like different categories you can put things into. So I'll just use my ABC. So it's like grouping out what is the A's, because I have so many B's. So I created a new game. It's based on Brian Tracy's Eat the Frog. So I created a frog list. So I do that. So I noticed that particularly when I'm in expansion, which has been happening lately, things will expand outside my comfortable sort of size of my plate. So sometimes when we have a certain set of operating patterns and then a breakthrough occurs and now more's flooding in, the challenge is until I adjust to it, there's going to be a lot of breakdowns. So breakdowns are actually the best teachers, because the breakdowns, okay, this isn't working, what's missing? And as I then expand the plate underneath the growth. So some people back down from growth, and I'm like, bring it on, because when it gets messy, it's not, usually people take it as a sign to put the brakes on, and I'm like, put on the foot on the gas, let it in and open up the space, and like, what can I learn from it? And what happened is, I was like, wow, all my big priority items are getting lost in the weeds of a bunch of B priority. And because they're important, they're just not like the most vital. So I created a separate list, and I literally call it the frog list. And the most that can go on it is 5. So I get to create the game. Like, what are the 5 frogs for the day? And, crossing them out and coloring them off, and they get displayed in their own spot too. Because even my regular notebook can just be like, woo, so many things. I like paper. And my frog list is just, it's like its own little sign that I can see. And it's been really fun, because then I can't miss it. And it has its own sort of little, grouping. It's grouped, because I like physical space as a way to see what's happening. Hence the reason I use paper calendars. That's just been like, throwback. But I noticed that when the frog list gets its own little framed area, I have been so efficient in that regard. So that's been one of my efficiency hacks, if you will. Yeah.
Well, and each person is different, and I think it's critical that we find a system that works for us. There's so many different ones out there. Yes, the ABCD method is one by Brian Tracy, and that's one of them I talk about. Obviously, you're familiar with his book, Eat That Frog. I mean, the training and certification process I went through with him was based on that book, and I love it that you say, hey, I have 5 frogs to eat today, and I make a frog list. Again, I think this is just great. It's looking at different ways of doing that, and this works for you. And
right.
The listeners, if you pick up on ideas, maybe you make your frog list and you say how many frogs you're going to eat a day. It's really, and again, it has nothing to do with a culinary dish, okay?
It's true, because I'm a vegan, so I take it as like just the fun of the.
Oh, you went for Rebecca both, okay.
Yes, so I'm a vegan and I got my frog list, and you're right, I didn't even like put it together. That's so funny. I love it. And what's funny, Christoph? It's Brian Tracy. It's both of us having a mutual respect and kind of being students of his, if you will, that you and I met because we were at that big event online, and you mentioned that you were Brian Tracy certified. And I remember going, oh, I want to know that guy. Yeah. And we chatted on the Zoom, and we kind of like, and so isn't that kind of, I forgot that. And here I am bringing up Brian Tracy. It's just so cool how.
No, I think it's wonderful. I mean, I've been on his, this email list for years, and so
phenomenal.
And he always has just fantastic stuff. And that's just one of the reasons I thought, okay, almost everybody has heard of Brian Tracy. Hardly anybody has heard of Christoph Nauer, so I use his fame, to kind of shed some light on it. So
it's huge. It made a big difference because it told me, but that's back to, my background for so many years was networking, and networking, it can be a form of leverage if we're paying attention to, okay, how do I leverage a 40-person in-person event or a 40-person online event? The way we leverage it, listen closely to the symbolic references coming out of people's mouths. Well, that was symbolic to me that you mentioned Brian Tracy, because it made me say, wow, I share something in common with this guy. I think I'd probably like him, because that's what we're trying to do when we get to networking, is we're trying to find people that are on our wavelength, whether it's for friendship, whether it's business collaboration, maybe I hire them, they hire me. So that's a very important thing, is make sure when we talk about ourselves at a networking or a nonprofit thing or some chance to just say, well, who are you and what do you do? Look for ways to capture the imagination of someone. It's almost like you're sending out smoke signals. That's kind of what we're always doing. We only have like 30 seconds or a minute. I'll say things like, well, I'm committed to peak performance in quantum physics and brain science. Well, who's going to want to meet me are the people who are crazy excited about anything quantum or catapulting results. Like, so we find our clan by use of, ooh, that resonates with me. Let me go seek them out and get to know each other. So I love that you did that, because I would not know you to this day had you not said that. Isn't that amazing?
Well, that's great to know. Now, I know with my next question, I already know which of the 6 you're going to be talking about. Just listening to you talk about your background and everything else. For the listener, the business name is Balance 6, as you probably know by now. And the 6 that we need to balance are time, money, health, relationships, self-improvement, and higher power. And yes, I can bet money that Cynthia is going to pick self-improvement, but you call it something else, right?
Yes. Absolutely. But before I do that, can you just say those 6 really slow? Because it's, it like the back of your hand, but I want you to say it. And I want everyone to picture it like a wheel. So go say that one more time so we all just kind of let it in.
I will do that. Yes. It's time and money. Money, we can always make more of. Time, we can't. Health, because once we lose it, we have to regain it. So let's not lose it to begin with. Relationship, key relationship. We already talked about how key that is, how we're drawn to different people and how we nurture those relationships. Self-improvement, there's always something else for us to learn. And then because of my background in ministry, higher power or spirituality.
Beautiful. So beautiful. So you nailed it. Self-improvement of your 6 is my favorite. And I call it self-development or personal development. And I would read, the reason that one is the most important to me is that I find that anything that has, like what has affected the shift for me and all the other 5 is the work I've done hiring a coach or participating in the training and development of myself and looking at new paradigms, examining new ways of learning. And one of my mentors, goodness, we go back over 20 years. Some people know him. His name's Eric Worre. He's an expert in the home-based business arena. And one of the things he said is dedicate 10% of your earnings every year to personal development. And he said one of the breakthroughs for him is when he hit 7 figures in earnings to be able to spend $100,000 that year on his personal development. And he actually says it's like the bigger you get, the next range of investment that you want to make in yourself. So I love that because it's a reminder to me, the best investment I can make is in me. My brain is an infinite magnet of possibility, so I can only attract to it what I can hold as possible. And most of the things I hold as possible get sort of in a comfort zone. And it's through working in these arenas of like rigorous self-development, coaches, mastermind groups, retreats, courses that are tens of thousands. A dear friend of mine worked in the field where they did transformational courses for executives. And it was a 6-day course that was $25,000 a person to participate in. Like that was like a drop of a hat for people who are going to making 7 figures a year. So it's spend that money and invest in myself has been the best thing I've ever done. And I was just going to think in the last year, because I've worked with a couple really rigorous coaches, it's the size of my goals that tell me who I am. Like I can say, whoa, I have changed so much this year because my goals have had like a doubling, tripling, and quantum, like the goals I'm setting have had a quantum leap because I can tell my spirit is yearning for something that even a year ago I couldn't have imagined. And that's as a result of the self-development and personal development investments that I've made into what do I even conceive as possible? Really, really powerful question. So thanks for asking that one because it really points to the core of everything I believe in. So that's really cool. Yeah.
Very cool. Actually, you brought up, you kind of answered this already, but I'm curious, you've mentioned a couple names of people who are influential to you. Who's someone that has been extremely influential to you in your career as an entrepreneur?
Yes, so I have mentioned that from Kiyosaki, Robert Kiyosaki, Eric Worre. One of the most, probably 2 of the most important transformational mentors. Some people have heard of Werner Erhard from a million years ago, so I'm taking some courses that sprung off from his work. And then what sort of a modern day transformative coach and trainer for me is a woman named Diane Collins. And she wrote a book called Do You Quantum Think? And she takes quantum physics and makes it palatable for modern day leadership. It's absolutely a work of art. And Diane is spelled with a double N. So I can never send enough people to this book, Do You Quantum Think? It's about how to incorporate nonlinear thinking from the breakthroughs in quantum physics and actually stand out into the future and create from there. It's just and it's fun because the way she wrote the book, you feel like you're actually sitting there having a cup of coffee with her. So even that's a breakthrough because not many people can accomplish that in a book. So my work with her now, goodness, probably getting close to probably about 17 years, 16, 17 years. Fundamental transformational thinking came out of working with her and her book. So yeah, thanks for asking that.
Fantastic. So, I mean, I would imagine the listener can't wait to connect with you online. How can they find you?
So probably my website would be the easiest place because it has my contact information there. So even though I have multiple businesses that are in different industries and different spaces, my coaching and social capital training programs have lived at Sea Change Networking. So that's a great place to just land. There's my bio. They can reach out to me that way. My YouTube channel is in the works. So at some point in this early part and in maybe the spring of this year, 2021, I will have my YouTube channel where people can seek out the phrase amygdala wrangler. So I'm on LinkedIn as well as the amygdala wrangler, which means I take that part of someone's brain and we're not trying to destroy it. We're not trying to crush it. We're trying to dance with that part of our brain that wants everything to stay the same and stay in our comfort zone and the patterns that we know. And I actually take people through this journey on my YouTube channel. I've got all this stuff about to go live, but it's just a really fun journey of like, where are the places where we kind of get stuck in old patterns, and what does it look like on the other side when we move into new realms and new patterns of thinking in our neural net, and what kind of breakthrough results come from that. So the amygdala wrangler is another way to find me as that unfolds. But for sure, Sea Change Networking, SEA, change networking. And for those who are Shakespeare fans, sea change is from The Tempest in the 1600s. It means major transformation or alteration. So I guess you could say I'm the amygdala wrangler who brings about a sea change in all areas of someone's life if they really want to get to the nitty gritty of how everything's interwoven. So yeah, thanks for asking that.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Cynthia, for having a conversation with us and sharing a few of your tips and tricks. And thank you to our viewers for joining in on this conversation. If you or someone you know would like some guidance on finding balance like Cynthia has found, make sure you take advantage of the offer Christoph provides his audience, a complimentary business breakthrough session. During this session, he will teach you how you can help double your productivity, profits, and time off. All you have to do is go to balance6.biz and sign up for a time that works for you. Until next time, make sure you focus on your long-term aspirations of having a better life and a better business.
This week's episode of Better Life, Better Business is brought to you by CA&C Video Productions. Since 1985, CA&C Video has been providing live streaming, event production, and analog to digital transfer services. They captured those life-changing moments, preserving your history for current and future generations. Because your history matters. Visit their website at cacvideo.com. Thank you so much for your sponsorship.
That's all for now. Thanks for listening to another episode of Better Life, Better Business with business and time management coach Christoph Nauer with Balance 6, the leading business and time management company in Northern California. Visit them at balance6.biz.